This bill represents the work of several years on behalf of the legislator working with the librarians across Connecticut. I would almost say librarians across the country because this is a problem in every single state. Other legislatures have tried to solve it. They have been unable to do so, frankly, because they were leaning more on the copyright end, and that was adjudicated in court that that was not the right way to pursue this. Coincidentally, today, our librarians are actually watching with great interest our debate because today is the Connecticut Library Association's conference down in Mystic. So we are actually being televised right there, right now. So I think that the fact that I'm getting a response from them in real time is fascinating. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of misinformation today about what librarians do or do not want and what their capabilities are or are not. I would start by saying our librarians are heroic. They provide safe spaces for our teenagers. They provide so much help to our seniors. And those are the two groups I would say are most affected by what is happening with ebooks. You know, we've heard a lot about publishers, we've heard a lot about authors. I would remind my good colleagues that the ebook business is an $18.13 billion business. That's what publishers are taking in, the big 5 publishers are taking in every year. That doesn't even account for the almost $8 billion in audiobooks that our publishers are also enjoying. So as we think about this, and I know that the good Representative Blumenthal, who's been working on this bill with me for 2 years, as he said, the comment about how we are wasting taxpayer dollars, one of our librarians actually testified that it's millions of dollars a year in taxpayer dollars that are quite literally going poof. So as I'm sure you all remember from history, the great library at Alexandria in Egypt burned down. It's as if every single time the end of this lease is reached, or this agreement on these ebooks, the 26 uses or 2 years is reached, it is as if we are burning a little part of that library down. And when we talk about whether or not the authors, how they're compensated, whether or not they need to be compensated, I'm in a unique position on this bill because prior to 2016, I was working on novels, was working with agents, was working with editors, have many, many friends who are traditionally published. They are what's known as mid-list authors. So even though many of them were afraid to testify on this bill because of possible repercussions by the publishers and possible, frankly, retaliation by the publishers, the mid-list authors really do need our librarians to refer their books to other people. But the challenge is, if you are reading, say, a trilogy, and you're a teenager, and you somehow got the second book first, but you'd like to go back to the previous ebook, by the time you go back, that ebook has disappeared from the library because that author was a mid-list author. They weren't James Patterson, they weren't Toni Morrison, they weren't Stephen King. They were not the authors that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Rather, they're the authors who are the mid-list authors who are making maybe $5,000. They're the authors who are waiting for their book to basically be, they get an advance, and whatever the advance is, you know, they're not huge. One of the first things they tell you at all these conferences is don't quit your day job. So if you do have one of those, you know, blue-collar workers that decides to write a book and is lucky enough to get a traditional publisher to pay attention, that's the first thing they tell you. Don't quit your day job because you're trying to basically work to getting through your advance. So maybe you'll be lucky that you work through your advance and then you're able to get another book deal, okay? Because usually they're one book at a time. We're also not paying our copy editors or the assistant editors very much. So again, when we're talking about an $18 billion industry, we need to make sure that we're actually using the right terminology and we're saying the right things. So not only can you not say, you know, borrow one of these previous books in the trilogy I mentioned, but if you're interested in other books by that author, they've probably also disappeared from the collection, which is really challenging. I would also say that, you know, publishers, when ebooks first came out, they wouldn't even allow the libraries to have them. So I think that we've heard a lot today about these corporations and how we want to protect them, and they're the ones protecting authors. They didn't do a very good job with authors because I will tell you, a dear friend of mine found out that her book was actually used to train AI. So even though they are the ones who put into place all of these ability, you know, electronically to protect copyright, they didn't do a very good job because still things ended up out on the web. That is not the librarian's job to protect them. And I think that the one thing that was not mentioned today, in terms of these library contracts, if they loan out one of these ebooks, I can't have it at the same time as, say, my colleague sitting next to me can have it. Those 26 licenses are independent, one at a time. They are not at the same time. When we spoke with the publishers, as we tried to negotiate with them, as so many people have talked about, they said, well, what are you going to do? Just have the libraries be able to loan these out to infinity? No, because that's not reasonable. We are looking for a reasonable solution, and 26 loans or 2 years is not a reasonable solution. I think that part of our librarian's job is building collections, and that's exactly the opposite of what is happening here. It's very difficult to build a collection. You get excited about an author, you want to read every single book that they have, and when they're in ebook format, you just can't do it, because by the time you get around to it, they've probably disappeared from the collection. It ultimately, we talked a little bit about free speech. I think free speech is already being limited, because these authors publish these books, they want to get them in our hands, we want the knowledge, we want to read these amazing books, but yet we're being limited by these egregious contracts over and over and over again. This bill is simply at its heart a book lovers bill, a bill that helps librarians, help authors get their books in the hands of book lovers, and a bill that makes it fair so we are no longer wasting our taxpayer dollars, which we spend so many hours talking about. And the fact that we are having a conversation about this and not acknowledging that we are letting millions of dollars be washed down into the ether every single year because of this ebook situation is frankly a shame. So I do encourage all of my colleagues to support this. Whether or not you spoke against it today or not, I hope that you will consider voting for this, because we need to support our libraries, we need to support our librarians, and more than anything else, we need to support these book lovers and these authors. It's not the publishers who need our support, it's our constituents. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.